I used to look out the rusted iron bars of my window and dream about being a bird. The chain that shackled me to my bed was just long enough to reach the windowsill, and so every night after my father would visit my room, I would lie awake and wait for the first rays of light to creep over the horizon, then walk over to my window to listen to the morning's first few notes of birdsong. Their melodies were so beautiful, I knew that they must have been singing about places far away and wonderful, about sailing on the wind through endless blue skies, looking down at the treetops that dotted the land below. Then, one morning, as I lay in bed, something impossible happened. I had fallen asleep the night before and would have missed my morning birdsong but for a tapping on my window. I rubbed the sleep out of my eyes and sat up to see a crow sitting outside on the sill, tapping my window with his beak. I crept over to the window and smiled at the bird. "Hello, Mr. Crow," I said. "Hello, little girl," said the crow. I stood there dumbfounded for a moment, not knowing what to say. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, I forced myself to speak. "You know how to talk," I said. "All birds know how to talk," he replied. "It's just that not all humans know how to listen." I pushed my window open a crack until it hit against the bars. The bird cocked its head in curiosity. "Why are you in a cage?" it asked. "I think it's my destiny," I said. "It's always been this way." "You look rather thin," replied the crow. "Would you like something to eat?" My stomach gave a weak growl. "Yes," I said, "that would be wonderful." Without another word, the crow took flight. A few minutes later, he returned with a small branch of figs. The crow watched me as I greedily devoured the fruit. After I had finished, he stared at me for a moment before speaking again. "I didn't know they put people in cages," he said. "Do you think they mistook you for a bird?" "I don't think so, Mr. Crow," I said. We whiled away the rest of that day talking. The crow told me all about what it was like to fly, how there was no better feeling in the world. He told me about the faraway lands he had visited when he was a young bird and could still make the journey north with the changing of the seasons. Finally, evening came, and the crow said that he had to go. The next morning he was back, however, with 2 more branches of figs. I thanked him for his generosity, and we talked another day away. That day he even sang me a song. He didn't have a voice for singing, but I thought his song was beautiful anyway. We passed the entire fall that way, and the bird's visits became the only bright spot in my life. He brought me not only figs, but cherries and walnuts too, anything small enough for him to carry. Soon, however, winter came, and with it the frost that destroyed the figs and cherries that the crow had used to bring me. His gifts became fewer and fewer, and I could tell from his tired voice that he was flying farther and farther away to get them. One morning, when the first snows of winter had fallen, the crow asked me a question. "What would you do to leave this place?" he asked, cocking his head to the side. I thought for a moment, but I wasn't sure how to answer. Finally, I told the truth. "I would do anything to leave this place," I said. "Anything at all." The crow solemnly nodded and said, "The frost isn't the only thing that winter brings." He flapped his wings once and jumped from the windowsill, and I didn't see him for 3 days. I began to fall into a deep depression. Every morning, I would still listen to the birdsong, but it sounded forlorn and empty without my friend there to listen with me. The morning after the 3rd day, my crow friend returned. It was so beautiful that day. The sun had come out from behind the clouds to melt the snow of one of the last green days before winter came in earnest. As the shadow passed over the valley in which we lived, I first mistook it for a storm cloud, but then I heard the sound. It was loud enough to crack the sky, but it wasn't thunder, it was birds. Thousands upon thousands of them descended on our house, a whirling storm of beating wings and shrieking caws. They crashed into the walls and windows, pecking at them with wild ferocity. The house shook under their assault, and their calls were so loud that I didn't even hear the windows breaking. They were not so loud, however, that I could not hear my father scream. It was over in a matter of minutes, and the key to my shackles slipped under the door. I rushed over and picked it up with trembling hands, sliding it into the metal cuff around my ankle and turning it. The cuff came loose with a heavy click, and for the first time I was free. The key to the door slipped under the jamb as well, and I opened the door to the rest of the house. The place had been all but destroyed. There was splintered wood and broken glass everywhere, and in the center of the living room was what remained of my father, a pile of blood-stained feathers. The birds had all flown off, but Mr. Crow sat on top of the living room fireplace, regarding me with a curious look. "Now you can fly free, little girl," he said. "No more cages for you." "Thank you, Mr. Crow," I said. "Will you come with me?" Mr. Crow shook his head. "I am an old bird," he said, "and my journey is coming to a close, but yours is just beginning." Mr. Crow flapped his wings and took flight, and I never saw him again. As I stepped out of the front door, my bare feet touched the grass for the very first time, and I could smell the flowers on the breeze as it drifted over me. At that moment, though my feet were firmly on the ground, my heart was soaring through endless blue sky, far above the world that I had left behind. I still wake up every morning to hear the birds sing, and when the first few notes break the silence of the early dawn, I think of Mr. Crow and smile. I hate birds. I've hated birds ever since I was forced to go to my grandmother Vera's home, who lived isolated in her inherited Victorian mansion. She let most of her estate fall away to ivy and rot, but not the 160-year-old astronomy room. That room was precious to her, a greenhouse that stored birds from all over the world in a stone and marble chamber, topped by a glass dome etched with outlines of the constellations, now shrouded by palm leaves, humidity, and hundreds of birds in flight. Vera had no need to see the heavens. She resented religion, culture, and humans as much as I resented birds. My brother fancied her calls and seeming ability to call down certain birds by song, and took my brother under her wing. The woman and her wealth turned away from me, and I had the privilege of never thinking of her fanaticism of birds of any kind, until the night something landed in my yard. A solid but soft pluff turned my attention from the TV to the window behind my couch. I saw a bit of my yard on fire. I worried some kids were pulling a prank that got out of hand and ran outside expecting to see a homemade bomb. Instead, I found a crater about the size of a car hood. In the center sat something that looked porous, about the size and shape of a metallic grape, smoldering in the dirt. The dry grass around the impact point was on fire from the overwhelming heat the dainty blob of metal put out. I stepped back, fearing it might be radioactive. I got my metal wheelbarrow and flipped it over the crash site, wishing that I was wearing lead pants. After a few belts of vodka, I forgot to care about radiation poisoning or Vera or AA or the never-ending calls of the fucking nightingales and went to bed. I went out the next morning with the intention of following Chernobyl's example, which was filling the hole with a few bags of concrete I had sitting in my garage. I stopped right outside my door and stayed there. 50 crows, at least 50, perched on the underbelly of the overturned wheelbarrow. They moved as slowly and deliberately as monks, each one clustering in as close they could to allow more on the wheelbarrow. The ones at the end slipped off the smooth edges to a gentle, dripping tar, something I had never seen them do before. The sight of all those black, soulless eyes together made me wish I had a shotgun. As I approached them, they tried to snatch the keys out of my pocket and flew off with the rest of the crows, up and over my house, joining the flying highway of crows that flew in straight opposing lanes from my house to somewhere in town. I followed the crows to the Orrtown shopping center, consisting of 4 stores and 4 vending machines that did nearly as much business as the stores. I parked and watched in a bit of awe at seeing the crows rip out and use the dollars and cards from pickpocketed wallets, tapping in selections mid-flight and working in teams to open the door to grab the snack inside. Another set of crows worked by sending 2 birds up into the machines to clear the spirals while 4 moved the flaps to get the goods and to let their buddies inside get out before painfully hauling the 3 or 4 sealed bags of snacks and cookies and arrows flight back to my home. 200 crows piled a mountain of chips, cookies, french fries, and half-eaten chunks of whatever they could find in the dumpsters into my yard without a caw or croak. They made another separate, neat pile of shiny things ranging from earrings to broken CDs. They were especially fond of miniature beach balls, anything spherical really, so that they could stage their own competitions. They had a crowd with 2 distinct cheers for their favorite as 2 crows competed in a ring of spectators. They would wobble on the ball for as long as a minute. The first to fall seemed to lose. The winner was denoted by having a spot of red house paint on 4 of its tail feathers. What I saw crawling on my land below repulsed me to no end, but I couldn't turn my eyes away and be left wondering what the heck they were doing. I began to watch them night and day. Some crows began to sing in harmonically. By day 2, they had invented a wobbling, bobbing dance that would infect every crow, all dancing to a song that consisted of talons scratching and tapping on a piece of bark. They made massive communal nests from the red river clay and reinforced them with sticks and made it soft with cotton and down. 90 crows could build what I considered to be lumpy, horrible-looking monstrosities that could hold 200 crows in one night. These things were looking to attract new residents, and it was working all the time to the tune of 50 more crows an hour. I wanted to call an exterminator, but my morbid curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see what would happen if I moved the wheelbarrow first. I walked out to my yard on the 4th day after the thing fell from the sky, determined to remove what was under the wheelbarrow. Before I could get within 2 steps of it, a very large crow swooped down and just grazed the finest level of my cornea. It was enough to stop me dead in my tracks and hold the back of my palm up to my weeping left eye. 2 equally large crows stood on the wheelbarrow. One held a rattlesnake's head firmly in its talons, while the other held the snake's tail and long rattler. The crows peered at me, seeming to want to communicate one message: "Come any closer, human, and we let our weapon go." I backed away. Prior life decisions made it impossible for me to get anything more powerful than a super soaker. I yelled and threw firecrackers, but the birds watched me like the town idiot causing a disturbance. They didn't fall for the sticky or bat traps. They refused to even look at the poisoned food I left out. I know, I have the heart of a marshmallow. They responded calmly and rationally to everything I did. I retreated up to the attic window for 1 week, watching the crows create their own tools, writing utensils crafted for their feet and beaks, works of art made of gold thread and sticks. Their mud apartments all had their own styles, their own whispering, cackling language, sparse and quiet and strange for what was once such a blunt and noisy creature. They sang and staged outdoor plays, mock battles, and love scenes with the crows from neighboring adobe apartments. Above all else, what concerned me was the fact that very few crows were working at the end. Most ate or copulated or sang or danced or balanced on balls or all of the above within eyesight of the holy relic under the wheelbarrow, while a highway of doves, pigeons, seagulls, and the occasional pet bird worked to bring in food and supplies, who were then allowed to eat from the cookie pile under the watchful eye of the other crows. They paid very little attention to me, or the bottle of gin seemed to have been glued to my lips. Perhaps they were too busy trying to grasp the concept of an economy. Perhaps they were experiencing anxiety for the first time in thinking they were the only ones who had ever grasped the concept of an economy. I watched them allocate food to the sick and the young first. Certain birds acted as might and pest exterminators for the crows. Others hung small wires or bracelets around other crows' necks as what I can only imagine as fashion. A finch displayed prize grasshoppers and June bugs, not unlike selling meat in an open market. They sung furiously, they ate constantly, they copulated freely, and they stayed immaculately clean. None of this softened my heart, for I knew during my week of observation I collected nearby holly berries and brewed them in a hot, dark place. After a week, the berries were reduced to a soup of nearly 100% ethanol alcohol. I brought out the deep tub to the birds as an offering. They ignored it at first, as they did with everything else I brought, but a few brave crows seemed tempted by the fumes. When they ate some of the mash and did not die, others swooped in to experience the new thing. They drank more than I could have ever hoped, more than I thought was imaginable. Watching the crows gorge themselves from above was like watching a wildfire smolder into existence and flare into a roaring, raging chaos where the crows couldn't stop cawing, rolling on the ground in half flight and uselessly kicking their legs that once danced so gracefully. Within an hour, the skies were filled with mid-air collisions, incessant cawing, and loose feathers from those that had been killed before they hit the ground. In less than an hour, the yard was a sleek, black carpet of ruffled black feathers and broken limbs. Even the snake was dead. The ones who had not died of poisoning or assault were leaving with the other slave birds. In the miniature exodus, one brilliant bird of paradise flew among them. I recognized it. It was one of Vera's birds. No sooner than the idea came into my mind, I heard her twitchy, shrill cries behind me. She walked through the door in my fence as twiggy and full of bitterness as I remembered. She looked at the carnage, at the bird I assumed escaped, the pile around the wheelbarrow, and the empty tub that once held highly alcoholic berries. She asked how I could still be just as stupid as she remembered me being as a kid as two big, clean-cut men walked into my yard. One carefully reached up and tried to grab the bird, while Vera told the other to search around. The damn specter sent the starstone to the wrong gains. When one of the lugs kicked over the wheelbarrow, I tried to stop him. He spun me around and choked me out in less than 3 seconds. I awoke 6 hours later with a pounding headache, laying with the crows. The meteor under the wheelbarrow was gone. The Clallam Free Press had an actual news story to run for a change this morning. Vera Gaines, 94, attacked and killed by a mob of crows. A mob, the paper warned, that is reported to grow larger daily. In unrelated news, instances of break-ins of bars and liquor stores have skyrocketed. The vandals smash a few bottles of booze and always leave a calling card of a few crow's feathers.